Hello there, and good day, everyone. From New Jersey, this is Ram Ganesan, your Wednesday 1 p.m. segment for Dojo Live. I'm joined by Tulio Siragusa from Los Angeles, California, and today's guest is Keith Brannan, Chief Marketing Officer at Kasasa, joining us from Atlanta.
Welcome. Hi, everyone.
To the show.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate y'all having me here. It's great to see you guys. I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Awesome. And on today's Dojo Live segment, we'll be talking about cross-functional efficacy, remote and hybrid teams, best chance at innovation, interdependence. Basically, how are we going to work better and more efficiently and more innovatively in this day and age of hybrid work from home, remote work, and all of the other things that have been precipitated by the pandemic that seems to be going on and on and on. But I think we're getting at the tail end of it. Schools are open and offices are reopening and people are starting to get back on planes. So let's hope that trend continues and this is hopefully in our past very soon. So Keith, to just kick us off here, tell us a little more about yourself. Give us your background and maybe leading up to how you became part of Kasasa.
I would say background-wise, I've just been lucky for a really long time. That's the best thing about my background. I seem to, keep stumbling into really great opportunities, and they all work out and lead to another one. So, spent most of my time, almost 25 years now, in financial services of one type or another. Right out of college at Alabama, did some postgraduate work at Kellogg. I've worked in, almost just pick a product. Odds are I've been either marketing it or selling it in financial services at one point in that time, from stocks, bonds, trading floors, insurance, both P&C, life, health, agriculture products and insurance, banking, credit unions, a little bit of everything. So it gives you a good perspective. I know most of the regulators really well. You get to understand how they do.
That must be the favorite part of your job, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, you've seen the industry completely go from free-for-all to highly regulated.
It's so funny that you say that. My first job out of college was literally 100% commission job as a stockbroker, which I thought meant you had to know something about stocks. It turns out I was just selling them. And at the time, though, you made money like, you remember back in the day as a commission. This was January of 93. So you're getting like a regular commission on a trade, right? That's how you're making your money. And fast forward 20 years, and then 2007, I was running a broker-dealer at a large multi-line insurer, and it was nothing but fee-based business and financial planning. It was just a totally different animal.
Yep, and heavily regulated, fiduciary. I mean,
I
didn't know the word fiduciary and what it meant until a couple of years ago.
We have no shortage of people wanting to help. That's the truth.
And it's an interesting world we live in, definitely for financial services. But that world has definitely embraced slowly but steadily this digital transformation, and all of this traditional financial services that we all knew used to be at a local branch, or this man in the suit that would meet with you at the local coffee shop every quarter or so. It's all gone digital with a vengeance, right? So tell us a little about that, and how is Kasasa enabling that transformation?
Yeah, Kasasa helps our institutions, just to put it in a really quick nutshell, Kasasa builds financial technology for banks and credit unions that are below 10 billion in assets. And the reason we picked that market is because they have sometimes a little bit of a disadvantage in having the resources and humans needed to really build the types of products that might be, what every consumer wants now, as fast as they're changing, especially and to keep up. So we kind of scaled our business to build the products that are rewards-based checking accounts. We have some unique lending opportunities as well. And then we help the institutions. They distribute the product. We support right at 900 institutions right now. About 700 and some change of those are on the branded product, which is always called Kasasa, which means we also support them with marketing. Because since it's called Kasasa, we get the use of that data, right? We understand who's going to like the word, who's going to be attracted to it, So we help those institutions with those products and help sort of modernize their product suite with a little bit different approach. And it's a product consumers love. On average, we're usually, typical product being distributed is 20 to 30 times the rate paid by a mega bank is what you would get paid in one of our products to use the account.
Well, that's an amazing ROI, and definitely leveling the playing field in many ways, because I think the small banks and the credit unions, they're the people who need that leg up in terms of technical competitiveness, if you will.
And they're a critical part. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the pandemic at the outset, but just from a pure consumer engagement around banking, like we're at the highest level of positive attitudes toward the banking industry that we've been in 15 years, mostly because of the help that the small institutions and a lot of communities were able to give during the pandemic. So it definitely proved critical why you want to bank locally and keep your money in the local community, because it gets lent locally, it supports your friend down the street who starts a business. So that's why we picked that market. We actually believe strongly that having a financial services system where power is isolated only in the hands of a few is not really a great solution for long term.
So I'm curious about our topic today, managing a remote workforce without sacrificing innovation. I looked at Ram's board behind him. I'm a whiteboard kind of guy, right? I like to draw and do force field analysis, which requires people being in the same room. And that's sort of how I grew up in my career, right?
Yeah.
So you look at banks in many ways with a lot more regulation. They got their hands tied behind their backs, and smaller banks and community credit unions really had challenges innovating as a result of that. And then you add this pandemic and everybody being remote.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
How do you do that? How do you not sacrifice innovation while moving everything remote? What's the answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want me to address how the banks were doing it or how our company does it?
I'm curious how your company's doing it, and then what you're seeing in the industry in terms of banks, how they're adapting to this new reality right now.
When I started the banks, just from an industry standpoint, we'll just say they were kind of unique in that they were considered an essential service. And so in many cases, they kept their doors at least partially open. You know what I mean? Like you could go to the institution if you had an appointment almost the whole time. They remained open for business, even if you couldn't walk in like you might normally. You still go to the drive-through, many of them. Some of them did close a series of branches for a while, but they would keep open some operations, right? Because people had to still get their money. And so in that format, they were a little bit unique, but they definitely struggled with what this sort of transitions over into our business, which is sort of the account opening and servicing, right? Many of the smaller banks and credit unions, and even the large ones, required people to come in when they would open an account, or people just wanted to. There's this really weird psychological thing. We all think, hey, my money's right down the street. There's my bank or credit union. Everybody actually knows their money's not really there anymore. It still makes you feel good.
Right. That's my bank.
Yeah. If I had to get my hands around somebody's neck, I know where I'm going.
The gold bars are right there.
That's exactly right. And it's this funny psychological thing. But that is, I think that's what consumers have always experienced is, they think about their money a lot and they kind of feel better the nearer they believe it is to them. And so, those banks had a tough time with account opening because nobody wants to set an appointment. That's the truth. Nobody wants to set an appointment to go open an account or go do their business. And so we saw a really rapid shift, of course, to online. I would have told you, looking at all the statistics that we see, before the pandemic, my guess would have been strategically, we had 10 years, most institutions did, before they really had to worry about really being all digital in most of their approaches. So they had plenty of time to make the right bets, take their time, do one project at a time, because that's kind of how the smaller institutions have to do it. And boy, did this accelerate things. I mean, we knew it was accelerating already. It's a decade. It cut off a decade. I mean, that pretty fast, right? And account opening, servicing, consumers that we were surveying who had before said they wanted to keep things the way they were, over half of that group instant adopters to a new way, right? Because you still needed to access their money and spend it and want to know what's going on, and the way to do it was through the tools.
Tell me about, like, we're seeing Apple and Google get into banking themselves, right? Either independently on their own or offering credit cards to Goldman Sachs and things like that. How is that affecting the community bank, and how is Kasasa competing with that?
I mean, the effect on community banks is that you definitely have more places for people to open accounts. And because of that, if the community banks and credit unions aren't responding with a better way to engage the consumer, a better experience for that consumer, and better products, it's very difficult for them. At the end of the day, we're all consumers, and not that many people just search for a brand of a financial institution anymore. If we think we know the product we want, most people know, hey, I need a checking account. I want a free one, or I want a high interest one, or something like that. So they search for that, and then they're product shopping at that point. And you have to be engaged in that product mix and that product process. And that is that's the key for a lot of these institutions, is getting in the middle of that product competition for the consumer. And now there's, the next layer up is it's a great product, but can I access it and use it the way I want to? So there's an experience and service element. That piece, I think, is what's really bifurcated the industry into new competitors, because they can build really good experiences. Truth is, they can't bank without a bank. You got to have a bank. You got to have a bank behind them. None of them are banks. Right. They may be able to process your business. They may be able to put their name on a card, but none of them are, in and of themselves, actually insured, regulated institutions. They have to have what we call an issuing bank behind them. Most of those issuing banks are community banks.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what we saw, at least with the payroll protection program, right? A lot of the enabling was done by these community banks and credit unions. They were front and center of that, and small businesses, right, preferred interacting with these local banks because it was a very delicate, emotional time for all of these businesses. They needed the funding, and not just once, twice, sometimes thrice, right, in terms of all of these economic injury loans and payroll protection program and all of these other government programs that were sent in, created to combat the pandemic. And community banks were the local heroes in many ways, right? And these people were doing a lot of weekend and all-nighters.
Oh my gosh, our clients were working around the clock for days on end. And it is funny, like, in the face of a crisis, as a consumer or a business owner, right? The crisis is one thing, but when you have a crisis where you don't know how to solve it, you don't know how long it's going to last, and you don't know what the end is going to look like, a lot of people did candidly decide, I would rather have someone I can turn to who's a human and a friend that I might actually have to walk in and ask for a favor from. I know if I'm just a number, I don't get that. I don't get the benefit.
The human touch, you bet. Nothing beats a live human one way or the other, right? So, which brings us to the topic.
That's a great segue, right? I mean, that's awesome. I felt that too.
Yes. So remote workforce without sacrificing innovation and the human touch. Let me just add a little more spice to that. How is Kasasa going about it? What are you seeing out there? How are you addressing this? What are the pros and cons of the remote workforce that's a reality of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's been good and bad for us. I think like everybody, I can tell you how we handled it real quick. Like, I'm part of the COVID response team, so I've been on it since day one. And there's 5 of us, and then at the same time, I have sort of just a personal interest because of my background in human behavior. As a marketer, I didn't actually have a marketing class until I was already the vice president of marketing. But I have my degrees in psychology. So the way humans were behaving was all pretty interesting to me during this whole time. And as a marketing shop, we support a lot of different types of marketing. So we see lots of different data and trends and searches and what people are doing, what they're clicking on, and how they're behaving. So we were monitoring probably the middle of February, like, oh, we've got some new trends happening here, folks. What they're searching for online went from bank near me to open account online, which is really just super interesting, right? Just like overnight, change in industry, change in behavior. And on our side, we started putting things in place that really helped our move to remote. We had already started some remote work. We had lots of people who were willing to do it. I've been remote for years and go back and forth to our home office. And we actually, to get ready for our remote, we actually ran a couple of mock remotes as the pandemic, before it was truly called, oh, this is a real problem. But in February, we ran a couple of weeks where the first week was like, oh, everybody's remote Monday. And then everybody's a remote Tuesday, Wednesday instead of a Monday. So what happens was not a weekend. So that enabled us as a company, I think, and leadership team to get comfortable with, okay, where the system's going to work. How hard was it really going to be to adapt if we had to go that way? So we started seeing it, and I'm not saying super early, but we had a couple of weeks notice in there to say, okay, we see what's about to happen. We were getting at least a test run at, what tools work, what doesn't. And that was super helpful for us.
Got it. And how is it at the tail end now as we're emerging out of it, or hopefully emerging out of it? Is the business responding to it, or your team responding to it? Because now what has happened is everybody is, for the last 18 months, give or take, right, established completely new lifestyle, completely new routine, ranging from school to childcare to healthcare to wardrobe, right?
I mean, people moved. Some people moved.
I had people directly reporting to me in vice president level roles, and people reporting to them. They were like, man, I don't have to live in Austin, Texas anymore, where things have gotten pretty high, and I've got family somewhere else, and it's hot here. I'm moving. It's fine.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead, man.
No, let me move from Austin. It's too hot for me here. Let me move to New York or Philadelphia. I want some snow for me, right? Reverse snowbird effect. No,
absolutely.
It's just, yeah. So what I feel is that we've not yet completely, so we were responding as a general global workforce to this remote challenge.
Yeah.
But what's happening is post-pandemic, when we're not forced to do it, we'll have to, every business or institution is going to respond to it differently. Schools, colleges, and restaurants obviously want to do it in person and live. For the businesses that were forced to stay open, like transportation or hospitals, etc., they've also figured out some innovative ways to reduce human contact, telehealth, more online check-in, more contactless transactions and other things. But then the general digital workforce, the work that could be done 100% remote, is pining to get back into human contact because, we've just been too far removed from it.
Yeah.
And we see both, right? Like people who are dying to get back into the office on one side. And there's some people like, no, I'm never going to go to an office ever again. I'm done. And it'll be an interesting shakeout that'll happen in the next 18 months, I would say, once we kind of stabilize going back to a more saner routine.
Yeah, we made a couple of really specific shifts in our business pretty early on in the pandemic. Number one, we saw great productivity out of people. Right. We saw we saw hardship early in our employees, which was just painful to watch as a leader because you couldn't control any of it. Normally in a work environment, you have some control. But when there's no daycares for people and that kind of stuff, that was the level of stress was extremely high. Fortunately, as we're coming to a more normalized state of being where at least we know what's going on, some of that has freed up. And we've actually decided that we will remain a remote first environment. And we are, so that means we can hire anywhere in the country. We don't have to be in, one of the office locations. We also still have an office, but cut that footprint dramatically and removed people. We don't have people's desks anymore, right? We've gone to 100% collaboration. I think that gets to sort of the point that you're making about, how do you manage in a remote environment and innovate and be effective? And we found the nuts and bolts of innovation still come from people that come from their brains and have brains with them wherever they are. So you have to find a way to get it out of them. And so even through a Zoom interaction or a remote interaction like this, it's a contact game, how frequently you're interacting around problem solving, whether you do that on a whiteboard or whether you do it through conversation, and how you uncover the problems that you want people to focus on are super important. That way everybody understands the problem and how you've uncovered it. We did a bunch of focus groups actually with our direct clients, sort of end of summer last year, to see how they were doing, present a number of innovations to them that might be interesting, and literally had people from the product team, the marketing team, and leaders getting to watch, participate, or just view the recording after. So you can really see, here's what's really going on. I'm not there to see it because I can't travel there, but I now hear directly from where ground zero of the problem is and what that feels like. And that's a really good way to, at least from our standpoint, to rally the problem solving around a consistent problem that is a gravity problem. When we say a gravity problem, we use that word at our company, and we mean a problem that doesn't really matter whether you like it or not. It doesn't even matter whether you agree with it or not. It is the problem if it's the problem of your customer or if it's just an immovable object that, like regulations, you're not going to fix it, right? It is what it is. It's a gravity problem. It's not going away. And as long as that gravity problem is there and we have people rallied around it, we could do it remotely to do the solve. Now, that's different than running a business. So I'll stop there. You guys, that makes sense to you guys what we're doing?
Wait a minute. So first of all, I like the ring of that. I'm going to co-opt that. I've written that down, gravity problem. I'll give you credit whenever I can, but it's mine now. It's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you see me using that in the next Dojo Live, gravity problem, courtesy Keith Brannan.
Yeah.
I like the ring of it. But, you touched on a very important point. Productivity has gone up. I agree. Operational productivity. Because we're doing these back-to-back Zoom calls, you don't have to travel for a sales pitch anymore. You don't have to travel for a deal to be signed. In the past, you had to see somebody in the whites of the eye to feel like, oh, I'm going to sign this contract for him. So you would put on your jacket and you would travel across the country just so that you can get that deal signed. It was a ceremony. All of this is now happening. Operational productivity, 100%, I agree, that has gone up dramatically with this kind of setup, right?
Yeah.
What I think I'm curious, and I continue to learn, how does strategic work happen, right? How do gravity problems get surfaced and solved? And how does innovation and creativity happen? Or are we dying to death by 1,000 cuts? Is creativity getting stifled, but slowly, it's being slowly taken out, and we just don't know it.
I don't know that it's being...
5 years from now, if innovation has kind of dropped off, we know that it's the effects of the pandemic. But is that what is happening, or are people adapting different ways to be strategic and different ways to be creative?
I actually don't. I think that even me personally and my teams, like I have teams that are on the creative side that build like media and creative, other teams on the product side that solve problems. I'm a strategist. I would say that even me, I've done some of the most creative strategic problem solving I've ever done over the last year and a half. And I think part of that is, oddly enough, the time that it takes to consume the right information is spent actually consuming the information instead of, not doing anything or sitting in a car or traveling somewhere. So there's definitely some payback that we've gotten that's meaningful. But to your point, I don't think we've lost creativity, but I do think you have to nurture it differently.
Well said. Yeah.
When you say that operations has gotten super efficient, here's the way that I kind of slice that compared to everything else. Yes, I can get a lot of work done. But the reason the people flew across wasn't to see the whites of their eyes to sign a contract or to engage with someone. It's the psychological reason is because you want to understand someone's intent.
You got it.
What's the spirit of this deal? And And if you take that down to a really superhuman level that we've all called water cooler talk in the past,
Right.
and think about a Zoom meeting or WebEx, or I'm not promoting Zoom, WebEx, Slack, whoever you're using, I don't care. It starts with the click of a button and ends with the click of a button. And the problem with that is that if you're in that environment beforehand, there's no meeting warm up where everybody's sitting next to one another. I can ask a peer of mine that's more experienced or may know the person who called the meeting a little bit better. Hey, are we into this or are we not into this?
Right.
And because that's really what they're asking. And
Yeah.
they're counting on their peers to have that conversation. And you can't have that during a Zoom meeting, and you can't have it after. There is no meeting before the meeting and no meeting after the meeting where you're walking down the hall or you're walking in the men's bathroom. You're like, Jesus, that was a train wreck. Oh my God. I hope we never do that again. And that doesn't happen anymore. And so what we've noticed is not just collaboration. After the strategy is set, right? You can do strategy, but after that, somebody's got to do something with it. And communicating the intent of the strategy takes collaboration. That's why we've moved to a collaborative environment, so we can get the teams together. Because the big weakness and where we're at right now, not just our company, but I think most, is if you want to innovate, you are by design saying, I'm about to change something. I'm about to change something in an industry, and I'm probably going to change how my company does something. And change management is super difficult to manage if you or the people you're asking to change cannot understand one another's intent and the spirit of the deal. And Zoom, WebEx, Slack do not provide an opportunity to understand that in mass. You have to do it one-on-one, and then you're relying on that one-on-one to happen 50 times correctly, and now you're playing the telephone game. It's way different if you can get people in a room and say, we have a big change initiative going on here. Here's a strategy. How are we going to do it? What's going to change? And who's got the ball?
It's so true.
The intent. It's all about change management when you innovate. It's all about change.
It's so true. I mean, it's efficiency in transaction versus relationships, right?
Yes.
You can get very efficient. I think we've all learned to be extremely efficient past 18 months, how to go through transactions because you're juggling your kids from school, doing homeschooling, etc. So it becomes very paramount to get through the transaction in the most efficient way, but it doesn't really build on anything, right? It's not the same as being in the same room and actually feeling people's interactions. So
it also reinforces silos, which is usually the killer of change management. It's not a killer of innovation. I actually find silos very, very effective at innovating because they know their business and their gravity problems so well. But one of the experiments we're running right now, I call it an experiment. We've got a pretty large change initiative going. We actually implemented a team. We call it Sled Dogs, right? And that group, we actually appointed different leadership structures and created underneath like a product leader, a multi-functioning team. It doesn't just have product people. It's got some tech. It's got some marketing. We did the same thing on the acquisition and marketing team. Those people have not just marketers and media, but they've got business development, they've got product people. So we tried to create some cross-functional teaming as one of the ways to create this synergy across the groups. We'll see how it's working out. It definitely has its bumps.
That's great.
Well,
all fantastic thoughts, Keith. We're up on time. I think we can definitely use another 30 minutes for this particular conversation. We're really going there. But unfortunately, our slot's up. Once again, to wrap it up, we were talking to Keith Brannan from Kasasa. And thank you again, Keith, for your time, and wish you safe travels to South Dakota.
Yep,
and it's good to see that you're back on a plane. And Tulio, over to you for any other closing comments.
Just want to remind everyone, we have another show at 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific today. So come join us at 12 p.m. Pacific for another show. And I don't have the topic in front of me right now, but we will be talking with Ademo. We'll be talking with Ademo of, just bear with me a second. I don't have the name of the company in front of me, but come join us.
The two of you guys is going to be a great show.
Nothing like being prepared, right?
I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here. So does Kasasa. So thanks a lot. It's been great.
Thank you, Keith. And keep innovating. Take care.
Yep.
Bye.
Cheers.